Welcome back to the Arch Advocate Podcast Monday morning. Thank you for joining. Thank you for hitting subscribe, hitting share, telling a friend, hitting retweet, all that good stuff. And thank you to all the Twitter followers. I got a lot of response over the weekend, a lot more new followers. Welcome to the show. Appreciate all of you guys. And thank you when you guys say, thank you for your service. I do appreciate that. I'm always very careful to, if I see somebody that served, to let them know, hey, I'm grateful for your service too, man or woman. Listen, a couple of things to get to today. We got Jordan Peterson made some comments that they were not received well. Let's just say that. We've got we're going to talk a little bit about Cuck Norris up there in Toronto, and the Kavanaugh hearing. Now, look, I wanted to let me just address this Jordan B. Peterson thing. Look, Jordan Peterson is not a guy that speaks out of school very often, right? When he's talking, he's as everything that I've ever seen, he's talking about things that he has dedicated his life to trying to understand, right? And it mostly hinges on, how in the world did Germany go so horribly wrong, and Russia. How is it that Russia was turned into a place that was so bad in the end that the communists had to put out public service announcements telling their people, like, look, just keep in mind, it's not okay to eat your children. That was a thing that happened, and tens of millions, was it like over 100 million people starved to death. It was really horrible. And so, like, when Jordan Peterson talks, like, he's looking into, like, the spiritual nature of how did people get to that level of insanity, and he approaches it pragmatically, like, okay, well, there's, maybe we should study psychology and what human beings are capable of. And so he comes out with a tweet or whatever. He puts out a message the other day saying, well, what if Kavanaugh, just stepped down? This would really, whatever. I don't know exactly what he said. He said something to the effect of, like, he should step down so that, it'll send a signal to the left that, whatever. You know what I mean? Now, look, I disagree with that sentiment, right? And I'm trying to figure out, like, why did this guy, this brilliant guy, who, illuminates a certain aspect of our lives, like, why did he step out of his area of expertise to talk about, like, American politics? Now, I know he's lived in the United States. Canada is basically just America's hat. But it's like, dude, this isn't your wheelhouse. And why did he do that? So let me just, look, I've said a lot of stupid things in my time. I've heard from people that I have the utmost respect for say things where it's just like I don't agree with it. I think that's really dumb. Here's a perfect example, right? The Reverend Billy Graham, right? Now, if you don't know this, like, Billy Graham is like one of the only ministers that high profile, and pretty much in the new world, there was nobody who had a higher profile than Billy Graham. And he lived his life above reproach. He was never once accused of anything. And by the way, if you're sitting there right now going, oh, there was that thing, and how about all that money? It's like, no, you're thinking of somebody else. All right? If you have, like, a legitimate thing that you're thinking of, I recommend that you go onto my website, archadvocate.com, and go down to the little email thing and send me a link. Because you're going to be hard pressed to find that article. You're going to be looking it up and be like, oh no, I guess that was Jim Baker. Oh, I was thinking Jimmy Swaggart, but I was seeing Billy Graham. So Billy Graham lived his life above reproach. Billy Graham was like the original guy who said, I won't be alone in a car or a restaurant with a woman who is not my wife. I don't care if she's 90 years old. He was saying that, like, in the 1950s. He was like the originator of that school of thought. It's like, look, you don't have, and by the way, that actually has that concept that Mike Pence gets ridiculed for it. That actually goes way back in the Judeo-Christian teachings. Like even before Christianity, there was Judaism, and that's where that comes from. It's like Orthodox Jews to this day, like if they're serious, like serious Orthodox guys, they will not talk to a woman who is not either their mother, their wife, sister, or daughter, or first cousin or whatever. Like, because it's the idea is like, look, if I'm a man, you're a woman. Like, there's nothing that can come out of us talking. There's nothing in it for it. I'm not going to, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to try to marry you. I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, there's nothing, there's too much potential for bad that any good, it just doesn't tip the scales well enough. So I'm just not going to do it. I'm just not going to talk to, if you're not my mother, my wife, my sister, my daughter, I'm not talking to you. In any context. I'm not going to drive in a car with you. I'm not going to sit in a restaurant with you. That's where Mike Pence gets that from. Billy Graham, that's where he got it from. He was a guy that lived above reproach, right? And he was a tremendous preacher of the gospel, right? And the gospel is actually very simple. You know what I mean? Like, repent for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. That is the gospel. That's the gospel that Jesus taught, and that's the gospel that Billy Graham taught. And, for his hard work and dedication, he received a great deal of fame, right? He was beloved. But even that guy, right? Like, for you Christians, do you know why we have the altar call? Because believe me, that is a brand new occurrence in the historical arc of Christianity. It's a brand new thing, the altar call. Here, I'm done speaking now, so if you would like to receive Jesus Christ into your heart, come up here and repeat these magic words, and then you will be, quote, saved from this eternal thing that sounds pretty bad, right? That's a brand new thing. That before Billy Graham, that didn't exist, right? He invented the altar call, and personally, like, if I was to ever meet Billy Graham, I would very respectfully, in a very somber tone, or a respectful tone. Unfortunately, he passed away, but that was something that actually he knew that he should not have done that, right? But it was a weird time. He was traveling the world, he was packing stadiums full. He was like, well, I guess we should just invite a bunch of people up and they can recite this thing called the sinner's prayer, which I also just invented, and then they'll be Christians. And it's like, well, it doesn't really work like that. And also there's really no reason in the Bible to think that that's the way it works. So anyways, what I'm saying is like, look, even Billy Graham, who I love, right, a beloved figure, he did a great deal for the perpetuation of Christianity. He did something that was very wrong, and he knew it. Like, towards the end of his life, he's like, man, I really screwed up at that whole altar call thing. I wish I hadn't have done that. Because now everybody does that, and it's completely unbiblical, and there's really no, like, you see people that are like, oh yeah, I don't want to go to hell when I die, so I'm going to go recite this, scripted prayer, and then, by the power of the magic of those words, then I don't have to go to hell for eternity. It's like, well, okay, a couple of things, what's wrong with that theory? Well, what I'm saying is like, look, people do stupid things and people say stupid things, and it doesn't matter who you are, right? Albert Einstein was one of the smartest people who ever lived, and one of his most famous sayings is like, the definition of insanity is trying to do, they're doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. It's like, well, no, that's actually not the definition of insanity. That's a good example of what insanity would look like if you were observing somebody doing that. You could say, hey, what you're doing lacks sanity. But the thing itself is not the definition of insanity. It's just that particular act is insane, right? So, even the smartest people in the world, because obviously Albert Einstein, he unlocked the door to what is energy, which completely revolutionized the world. Obviously, one of the smartest men who ever lived said something really stupid. So I think we have to be very careful. Like in the case of Jordan Peterson, it's like, look, yeah, he said something stupid. Okay. All right, so what are you gonna do? You're gonna throw away a lifetime of good work, of right work. You know what I mean? Like when he gets talking about like the psychology of you know, bettering yourself and being a better man and not becoming a Nazi or a, you know, Stalinist or whatever, you know what I mean? Like not giving in to whatever it is that's in the human condition that causes that. You're just going to throw that away? The dude's been working on that his whole life. And he's right. You know what I mean? So he comes out with one stupid tweet. And let me just say this too, because I have a theory about this. I have no proof. But I think as I break this theory down, I think you'll agree. What do we know about Jordan B. Peterson? Well, we know that about a little over a year ago, he made a stand against the University of Toronto, where he currently is teaching, or at least was teaching. And because of that stand that he made, he somehow caught the attention of one Joe Rogan, who has the biggest podcast, or maybe the second biggest. I think Adam Carolla and him are like tied for first. They go back and forth. I could be wrong, but one of the top 2 podcasts in the world. Over 6 million people, you know, subscribe on YouTube and whatever, right? He gets on that show. Joe Rogan finds out about him and says, I want to talk to that guy. He goes on the Joe Rogan show and blows everybody's minds. And all of a sudden, the life work of this man, you know, the passion that this man has had his whole life and everything that he's done professionally comes to a head. Right? There's people that do good work their whole life and never achieve the level of fame that Jordan Peterson has. So all of a sudden, it's like God himself has opened up the windows of heaven and poured out his blessings upon the work of Jordan B. Peterson. So he finishes up a book that he's been working on called 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos, right? He'd already been working on it, but he's like, well, I've got this fame right now. You have to make hay while the sun shines, sunshine. So he finishes up that book and he publishes it. It goes to #1, and thus making him the most famous Canadian who ever lived. And all the wealth and the fame that comes along with that, right? So you got to keep in mind, this is all brand. Fame is not. Fame causes an allergic reaction to people who have it. Right? You ever wonder why like Hollywood people act so weird? It's because it's not natural to be famous. You know what I mean? It's not. It puts you into a weird space. And Jordan Peterson had lived a normal life, right? He was certainly respected in his own circles before he got on Rogan, but not where everybody on the planet knows your name famous. Not where everybody on the planet wants to buy your book famous. So he's just thinking to himself, like, look, you know, I'm only going to have a #1 bestseller. You know, this is the only time I have to have this. You know what I mean? To have a best-selling book is an anomaly in and of itself. You know what I mean? It's very rare. And so he's just thinking like, well, I guess I better, you know, I need to promote this book because, you know, once the fire dies down, there's no third book. I don't have another, you know what I mean? I don't have another one in the chamber. I have to make the most of what I have. And right now, the spotlight of the world is on me. And so what does he do? Well, he goes traveling around the world. He flies to Australia. He flies to England. He flies to, what was the one in Sweden or Denmark or whatever. Like, he's just flying around the world. And let me tell you something, folks. Look, if you have never flown across either the Atlantic or the Pacific, let me assure you that just the flight alone will kick your ass. I flew to Australia in 2004, 2005. So 14 and a half hours out of Los Angeles to Sydney. By the way, if you're ever going to go to Australia, I strongly recommend you do the straight through shot, right? Because it's just, the mentality is just get it over with. Don't do the layover in Hawaii. Because it's going to add like 4 hours onto your trip. And it's just like the whole thing is brutal. So I got on a plane, traveled at 500 or 550 miles an hour, whatever. And you know, when I got to Australia, so like you have to understand. So I take off mid morning, right, and traveling at 500 plus miles an hour against the rotation of the Earth meant that that day was like 20 hours long for me. Like I could see the sun in the sky for 20 hours. When I landed in Australia, it was like it was nighttime, but it hadn't been nighttime for very long. It was a very long day. And I got off that plane, and like my brain just it felt like my skull had been filled with oatmeal. You know what I mean? Like it was very difficult to communicate, right? Because there was people that met me and whatever, and it was like it was hard, man. Because another thing too, like you're up at 33,000 feet, the radiation's different up there. You know what I mean? It's you're exposed. That's why they don't let pilots, those guys, like they only let them fly that flight like once every couple of weeks or something like that, because it's like there's more radiation up there and it can give you cancer. But whoever you are, it's like it's going to affect you. And when I hear about like stand-up comedians or Dr. Peterson or whatever, it's like they fly to Australia and they go immediately to some stand-up gig or some concert or whatever. It's like I don't understand that. How do you so you took that flight and immediately got into a cab, went to the comedy club and did a half-hour set? I don't understand that. It's such a brutal thing. It's brutal. And so this guy, who by the way is older than me and I'm 45, this guy has been flying around the planet getting his message out there, getting his life's work out there, because now is the time. There's not going to be another time for him. He has to make the most out of what he has right now, because it's not going to come again. And however much effort he puts into his work and getting his work exposed and getting it out there, like whatever he does right now is going to carry him through the rest of his life. And so I can imagine, like, he's probably thinking, like, I can do this for a year, maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years, but, like, right now I have to do this. So this guy has been traveling nonstop. And if you've been watching his life at all, you know that that's true. That he's just been going balls deep in this crazy quest to get his the accumulation of his life's work out there. That guy has to be exhausted. Like an exhaustion that I can't even comprehend. And neither can you. You know what I mean? Can you imagine that? Can you imagine flying around the world all the time and being put on TV and being put into these weird situations where everybody, like that lady in England, and that wasn't the only one. So what you're saying is you hate all women. It's like, what? You know what I mean? Can you imagine like being mentally exhausted and then going on TV where all the lights are bright and it's a hostile environment because the lady doesn't like you. Plus you've got that pressure knowing like, dude, millions of people are going to see this. Millions of people are watching this as it happens. You know what I mean? That's a lot of pressure. That guy has been moving at that speed for over a year. I can't imagine that. I cannot imagine how tired that guy has to be. And he has to be that tired. And furthermore, just one more point on this. That old saying, like, you are who you hang out with, that's a real thing. Right? You are the average of your 5 closest friends. Right? That's a very, very true statement, and you know that because like you can be if you hang out with only an exclusive group of people, you're gonna find that you guys don't disagree on much, right? The most of what you believe in your beliefs will morph into their beliefs and vice versa, because that's how it works. That's why if you're an American, if you hang out with people from Texas, or people from the South, after a while you start picking up on their accent. and you start mimicking their accent. Like that's that's a natural phenomenon. You know what I mean? You do morph into the people that you hang out with, and vice versa. That's well documented. And who is Jordan B. Peterson been hanging out with? 3 bedwetting liberals. You know, the 2 Weinstein brothers, and the other, Sam Harris. Right? Sam Harris is, again, like, I don't know why Jordan Peterson hangs out with that guy, because the guy doesn't have a single original thought. None of his thoughts can be proven. Right? Determinism. It's just saying, like, I'm going to say something that's going to make me sound real smart, and nobody's going to be able to disprove it because there's no way to know this. And furthermore, I'm going to say this again because I'm going to keep saying it. It's not his thought. It was John Calvin's thought. Right? John Calvin was like the original dispensationalist, where it's like, there's this thing that I don't understand, salvation. Right? What is salvation? What does it mean? How do you get it? How do you know if you have it? You know, all those sorts of things. Like, none of that stuff is really discussed in the Bible. Right? You know, if you call upon the name of the Lord, that you will be saved. But it's like, okay, well, but what does saved mean? What is salvation? Saved from what? Saved from my present circumstances, or saved from eternal circumstances, right? Like, you can go mad thinking about those things, and the easy way out is dispensationalism. And that's what John Calvin did. He said, listen, I can't figure this out. I'm not mentally strong enough to have this conversation, so I'm just going to make up this BS and say it's all, it's all determinism, or as he put it, predestination. Some people are born and they're destined to go to heaven, and some people are born and they're destined to go to hell, and it's all under God's sovereignty and we can't question it. It's like, you coward. So what John Calvin did is he took the kingdom of God and removed the mystical from it, the mystery. Right? He tried to answer an unanswerable question with an absolute that he just made up. So here, check out this thing I just made up. So he took the kingdom of heaven and he removed the mystical from it. But there was at least still the kingdom of heaven, right? Well, Sam Harris comes along 500 years later and says, well, I'm going to take the demystified kingdom of heaven, and I'm just going to remove the kingdom of heaven from it. And that's what he's got, is determinism. It's Calvinism minus the mystical and the God. It's not original. It's stupid. It cannot be proven. You know what I mean? And you can't disprove a negative. It's lazy. And why it is that Jordan B. Peterson is giving this guy any amount of time is beyond me. It's like, dude, you're not helping me. You know what I mean, Dr. Peterson? You're not helping me by talking to Sam Harris. If you think you're helping Sam Harris, that's one thing. But would you please not put it on YouTube? Because it's like, dude, I just want to listen to you. And every time you and Sam Harris sit down and talk, it's like half of the time I have to listen to what he has to say. And I didn't like what he had to say before I even knew who he was, because I've already heard what he has to say. What he has to say is Calvinism and dispensationalism. And I've already fought those battles, and I'm already over it. So here's Jordan B. Peterson, who is exhausted. We know that he's exhausted because we can see his itinerary. We know how much he travels. We know how hard he's working. And he's not, he's not flying around the world, as a pipe fitter. He's flying around the world as an intellectual. Like he's flying around the world putting strain on his mind by discussing these very deep and profound things. And then on top of that, the only people that apparently he's hanging out with, is the Weinstein brothers, who are, they do good work, but I mean, come on, they're liberals. They're not exactly liberal in the classical sense. I mean, they do have that element. And Sam Harris, who is the child of the lady who created the Golden Girls, has $500 million, and he grew up rich in Los Angeles with nothing to do. Out of sheer boredom, Sam Harris became a very good reader of other people's ideas. And out of that, he became, because he doesn't have any original thought, he learned like, oh, I can, I'm pretty smart. I'm smart enough to regurgitate other people's ideas. I don't have to come up with any original thought like Jordan Peterson has. I can just regurgitate other people's garbage and sell books and go on tour and make money. I don't have any respect for Sam Harris. Zero. You know what I mean? It's unoriginal. Anyways, so in defense of Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, I'd say, listen, the guy's got to be wrecked, man. He's got to be exhausted right now. And he said some stupid stuff, but one thing that we can take away from that is like he spoke out of school. He talked about something that he doesn't talk about ever. I've never heard him. You know what I mean? Like, so I think we can give this guy a little bit of latitude, and just say, all right, well, you look exhausted and you're hanging out with knuckleheads, so I think we're going to cut you some slack. Moving on to another Toronto native, allegedly, Cuck Norris. So this, the kid that kicked that pregnant woman, right? Apparently he's being brought up on charges. Thank God. I was actually very worried about this. All right. Here's the thing. Sometimes I get some messages from you guys saying, "Hey, Pete, like you're really getting a little too far into this, people rising up and picking sides and that whole team mentality and all that." It's like, fair enough, right? I fear it as well. But, when I talk about these things, it's like, I'm just looking at it from just like a normal sociological progression type of thing. If in your neighborhood there is a crime that is happening and is happening repeatedly, eventually you're gonna go down to the police station and say, look, why does this keep happening? And then they're gonna have to give you an answer, right? And if that answer is dissatisfying, if they say, well, listen, those are those people, there's really not a lot we can do about it. It's like, okay, well, then you are putting me in a situation where if you, as law enforcement, refuse to do your job, it then becomes my responsibility as a citizen to enforce the law and to give the law. This is a very dangerous proposition. I know. I do not like this idea. It never works out great, right? Here's a good example. I was thinking about this over the weekend. You guys, if you're a good person by any stretch of the imagination, then you've seen the movie Tombstone, right? And if you haven't seen that movie, then you're a bad person and you should find a different podcast to listen to. Tombstone was a great movie. Mostly because of Val Kilmer's role in. Did you know that role almost killed him? Because he went on like a month-long diet of just like whiskey and cigarettes and like not very much else. Like that look that he had, that sunken face with the red eyes. By the way, when you go watch that movie and you see the redness under Val Kilmer's eyes, that ain't makeup, people. That role very nearly killed him. And that's why we all love Val Kilmer. But you may have also seen an epic that what's his name, Kevin Costner did about the same subject, and that movie was called Wyatt Earp. Right. So that's the movie. Wyatt Earp is actually very much closer to the historical reality of like all of those people. And Doc Holliday, he was not a good dude. He was not a guy that had any friends. He was a very angry man, very angry drunk. He was a murderer. You know what I mean? Like that he was in a long-term relationship with a professional prostitute. You know what I mean? Like it was not fancy like it's depicted in Tombstone. It wasn't like that, right? Wyatt Earp was not a good man. Wyatt Earp was a vicious. He was just not a good dude. All right. It just so happened that he turned up on the right side or the correct side of the law, right? and he got a job in Kansas City as or Dodge City, as a lawman, and he did some really good work there because he was very brutal on lawless people, but brutal nonetheless. You know what I mean? Like, he was brutal on those people, and so, Tombstone, got a hold of him and said, "Look, we need you to come down and square things away down here." In that movie, the Earp brothers and the rest of their squad, like, they actually did hunt down the cowboys and they killed a bunch of them. And because of that, Wyatt Earp was actually charged with murder, and there was a warrant out for his arrest until the day he died. They just never enforced it. They never went and got him. Like, he was a guy that was accused of murder. It was my point is like, he wasn't a good dude, right? And the reason I was telling this story is like, look, when the law fails, right? When I'm sorry, not when the law fails, but when law enforcement fails, that vacuum has to be filled, right? Nature abhors a vacuum. You can't, if law enforcement refuses to do their job, then the citizens are going to step in. It has to be that way, because people will not, you know what I mean? They would rather have Wyatt Earp come in and bash a bunch of people in the skull and murder a bunch of people. They would rather have that than to say, well, let's just not have any police and I'm going to take care of it. Because then it's like, well, then it's guaranteed that the citizenry is going to end up murdering a bunch of people. And there's going to be indiscriminate killing. And then you have chaos, and it's not good. You know what I'm saying? What I was saying with the whole Wyatt Earp story is that like when it falls to the people, and when people take the law into their own hands, there might be good that comes out of it. Like when the Earps like killed the cowboys, that was probably, you know what I mean? Forgive me for saying this, but that was probably in the best interest of that society. So good, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. But also very bad, right? Also very bad. You can't have that. And so as I was watching this thing with Cuck Norris, whatever that kid's name is, the guy that kicked a pregnant lady, Roundhouse kicked a pregnant lady. What I was seeing out of Toronto was that, or wherever he's, I believe it's Toronto, but what they were saying was the police, they're not really sure if they're going to charge this guy. And I was just looking at that going, oh no, this is going to be very bad. Because if the police, because look, for whatever reason, Canada's in this weird liberal funk right now, and I think it's going to be coming to an end pretty quick. Because let me tell you something about Canadians, man. Those are not a weak people. Right? Those are people who are lumberjacks, and they're hunters, and they're, you know what I mean, like, and they're the Canadians' history with war is like, those people are warriors, man. Like, those aren't sissies up there. Don't let their polite nature fool you. Like, those people are very capable, right? But I was watching this whole thing, and they were saying like, oh, this guy might not get charged and whatever, and I was just thinking like, oh crap, you're going to have the social equivalent of Wyatt Earp rising up. Because the people of that town, like the good people, they're not going to allow that kind of lawlessness. And if the law enforcement agencies refuse to do their job, then the citizenry will step in. And that's a bad, you know what I mean? That's how you get that guy, getting lynched or getting hanged or something. You know what I mean? Like, that's bad for a society. You know what I mean? When you have that kind of thing, it's very important for law enforcement agencies to not only do their job, but to do it righteously. So I was very happy to see that it looks like Cuck Norris is going to be charged with a number of felonies. So good. Now moving on to Kavanaugh. So as you know, over the weekend, Kavanaugh was very narrowly voted into the Supreme Court by the Senate, right? Now, we've all been watching this thing unfold. And I've said this many times before. These Democrats, I don't understand what their play is, because it's when you have Dianne Feinstein hanging on to a rape allegation when she should have been talking about it in private meetings with Brett Kavanaugh and in the Senate Judiciary hearings. She didn't bring it up. What that is going to do is it's going to raise eyebrows within the Democratic Party. I've said this many times before. These actions, they are not going to take Republicans and wake them up to whatever dream that you're living in, like, oh, I totally see what Democrats are on about now. I'm going to go be a Democrat. You're not going to pull anybody over to your side by lying and manipulating. The only thing that can happen is you're going to lose people. Now, in the case of the Senate, we can see that very thing happening. Right? There's only 100 senators. Right? Every state gets 2 senators. And though Kavanaugh, I think he won by like 1 vote. It's like, this is what I'm talking about. You take 100 people, right? Which Republicans did you turn? Which conservative thinkers did you turn? You even lost Democrats. There was like 2, I think there was 2 Democrats that voted in favor of Kavanaugh. This is what's take that and then just multiply it by 340 million people, or 320 million, however many it is, right? That's what's happening. Right now, everybody that thinks that they're a progressive or thinks that they're a liberal or thinks that they're whatever, anything that's left, all of those people, what they're seeing is people who are being paid by George Soros to scream at elevators. They see that, and in their mind, they equate that to, oh, I once saw a homeless guy who smelled like piss screaming at a mailbox. That's what these people are doing, only they're getting paid for it. And that's disingenuous. Like, you're screaming at an elevator, lady, crazy lady. You're just a crazy lady who's screaming at an elevator. This is where I get off, people. I have to vote on November 6th. Now you've lost my vote. I cannot vote for you because you're screaming at elevators. And people see that is disingenuous. They know it in their heart. It's like if you went to church, right? Like let's say you were at your house on a Saturday and somebody came knocking on the door, and a group of 2 men and 2 women who were appropriately dressed came and said, "Hey, we just want to let you know we're starting a church in your neighborhood. And it's a Baptist church or it's a Pentecostal or whatever, like a normal, something that you could see yourself going to." And they said, "Look, here's the thing, like we really need to set an impression. So I'll tell you what, if you come to church on Sunday, to our new church, I'll give you $5 right now if you will commit to me that you'll be there. And once you get there, if you sing very loud with your hands up, we will give you $20. And if at the end of the sermon, if you will go up at the altar call and fall down on the floor and flop around like a fish and make a bunch of babbling noises with your mouth, we'll give you $100. But you say, "No, Pete, that's ridiculous. I would never do that." Well, hold on a second. Right? What if you would? What if you really needed that money? Right? How much money was it so far? $115 or $125? Like, let's say you needed that $125. And you went down there. Right? You took the $5, you went down there, you got your $10 for showing up, you got your $20 for singing real loud, you got your $100 for speaking in tongues, right? You would know in your heart that, like, none of this is real. I'm not being genuine here. And I just, I need the money. And I am a Christian, so I'm not against any of these things that I'm doing. It's just there's a little bit of money. You would know in your heart, like, this is not genuine, right? These songs that I'm singing, I'm not singing from a place of like genuine passion. You know what I mean? Like the fact that I'm here is not, it's not because I'm interested in community. I'm here for the money. You would know that in your heart, and you would feel probably like a piece of garbage, wouldn't you? Right? Well, if you saw somebody else doing it, you would look at them and be like, "You're a piece of garbage. Like you're not genuinely interested in these things. Why? Like, I get it. Like everybody needs money, but like, don't pretend like you're being genuine. Everybody can see it. Well, that's what's going on with the Democrats right now. They're seeing these women, and it's always women, by the way. Because they know, like George Soros knows, like you have to send in women because women won't get punched in the face. If you get a bunch of dudes screaming into an elevator at a senator who has 2 Secret Service guards with him, somebody's going to get punched in the face, probably shot. Not women, though. You can't punch a woman. That would be wrong. That's why they keep sending in women. And the rest of everybody who wants to vote Democrat, they all see that and they're all thinking like, that's not very genuine of you. And now you're putting me in a place where it's like I'm associated with people I know that are not genuine. They don't care. And this is what's coming on November 6th. Listen, I'm going to give you my predictions now, and as you all know, from my many, many dead-on balls accurate calls in the cryptocurrency market, like I'm never wrong about these things. I told you guys, man. I told you guys Nike stock was going to skyrocket, right? After the, what's that bozo's name that got the contract? I told you guys, right? I'm never wrong. But what I'm saying here, and by the way, yes, I'm joking, but I don't see a blue wave. I see a crushing tsunami of red on November 6th. And, and after that, it's like, I think we're going to have a whole new Senate. I think we're going to have a whole new Congress. And I think that we're going to see some very real and important changes. It was important to get out of the Paris Climate Accord. In my opinion, it is very important that we remove ourselves from the United Nations, right? At least temporarily, right? Until that organization gets itself squared away, it's like there's really no point for us giving you people money, right? Because you're not doing anything. You hate Israel, you know what I mean? Like we need to get out of that, but also we need to have term limits on Congress. We need to have, voter security, as in voter identification. Like you have to have that. You have to have that. You can't have people that don't have any skin in the game voting, right? Because they're not. You know how, like, if you're a man in America, like on your 18th birthday, you have to sign up for selective service, right? Or else you're not allowed to vote. You're not allowed to do a lot of things. If you haven't signed up for selective service, there is a lot. You can't take a student loan. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of things you can't do until you sign up and say, yes, I understand that if my nation goes to war, that I will be called upon to fight for my country. That's what selective service is. Did you know that, like in the old days, when women were fighting for the for the right to vote in America, that wasn't the issue. The issue wasn't should we allow women to vote or not. The issue is that if you wanted to vote back then, you had to be registered with selective service. Meaning you had to, like, if you wanted to have a say in who was going to be president of the United States, or who was going to be the mayor of your town, or who was going to be the dog catcher, or whatever, if you wanted to have a say in that, then you had to volunteer for military service, and you had to volunteer for, like your local fire department, right? And so what the women were saying is like, we want to be able to vote, but obviously we cannot go to war and pick up a rifle and go live in the trenches and go fight the Germans. And obviously we can't be firemen, because we don't have the physical strength that men do. right? And so what was going on back then, it wasn't like, should we let women vote or not? It was like, should we let anybody be able to vote if they are not in a position where they are able to volunteer to protect our community should our community catch on fire? Or should our community be besieged by the Japanese or the Germans? Like, if you can't fight a fire or an enemy, then you don't get a vote. That was the problem. And so women's suffrage, like women's ability to vote, it wasn't like women versus men. It was, the argument was, there was a lot of women who were against at first. They were saying, no, we don't want the right to vote. And they fought other women over that issue, because they were saying, look, if you push this issue and make it so that women are able to vote, what you're going to do is put us in a position where we might have to leave our children, our infant children, and go fight a fire because we have a social obligation under that circumstances. I would have a social obligation to go fight a fire when I've got a 6-month-old baby at home. So listen, bitches, like, shut up. Like, please. Like, that was a very real thing. And it's like, this, the thing with, voter security, that's what it's about. It's like, okay, look, all right, if you're a woman, like, you can vote, but you don't have to sign up for selective service, and you don't have to become a volunteer fireman or policeman or whatever. You can just vote because you're an American citizen, all right? Are we all good? Okay, everybody's good. But now it's like, man, there's people here that are they're not even citizens. Many of which are not even here legally, right? They're not supposed to be here in the first place. And it's like, no, you can't vote. Why? Because you don't belong here. You don't have any skin in the game. You can't just, like in Minnesota, it's like, oh, we've got all these Muslims here and they want Sharia law. And it's like, well, we don't care what you think. You're not here legally. You're not a citizen, right? You don't have any skin in the game. Like, this isn't your country. You know what I mean? And so, like, these things that are coming up after November 6th, it's going to be if I'm right, it's going to be a massive correction on a lot of things. Like securing, new levels of security when it comes to the vote. New levels of scrutiny when it comes to, like, our social welfare and our nanny state policies, where it's like, look, yeah, we have to have welfare, all right? There's people out there that just don't stand a chance, and we have to take care of those people, right? But the amount of abuse and fraud and waste that goes on in welfare and WIC and SNAP and, the food stamps and all that other stuff, like the level of abuse that's going on, it's like, look, we can't afford this. We can't afford, like, listen, if you're on drugs, like if you're sitting around smoking, doobies, yeah, I said doobies. If you're sitting around taking bong rips, it's like, no, you can't have any, you can't have any food stamps. Get your ass to work. There's going to be some very big corrections, bigger corrections in our society, and thank God for it, because man, we put our toes right up to the line, didn't we? We got really crazy there. And I think we're going to be seeing some massive corrections. So, good on you, right? Be sure to get out there and vote. Listen, if you don't vote, if you do not vote, then the lady who screams at elevators votes for the both of you. And which way do you think she's going to vote? What would happen to America if she was running it? If you don't vote, you give your vote to her, and she votes for the both of you. That's how that works. Do not fail to vote this year. Hey, if you guys want to support the show, you can go on to archadvocate.com, arch-advocate.com, and if you want to send some money on PayPal, that'd be great. If you would like to be a monthly Patreon supporter, I would appreciate that too. Whatever's good for you. Archadvocate.com, arch-advocate.com, and I will talk to you tomorrow.